Senator Bernardi.
Thank you. As I was saying before I was interrupted by question time, I was commenting on the cost to industry of the CPRS, and I make the note dollars and cents are one thing. To this government, they are simply entries on a balance sheet with no thought of the impact of their spendthrift and damaging policies on people. But in the end, this shouldn't be just about numbers. It's got to be about jobs. And a few brave companies have been prepared to go public with the impact on their workers of this CPRS. The Minerals Council has found over 66,000 jobs will be lost or forgone as a result of the CPRS. Rio Tinto has stated that the CPRS, as proposed, will cost jobs now and in the future. Xstrata predicts that between 5,000 and 10,000 jobs nationally will be lost. Alcoa has concerns about 1,800 jobs at risk in Geelong and Portland. Exxon predicts 350 jobs lost at their Altona refinery. Hundreds of jobs will or could be lost at BlueScope and OneSteel. Their aluminium smelting industry would cancel their expansion plans, with a loss of 3,000 permanent jobs and up to 15,000 construction jobs. And even the clean energy projects at Zerogen and Envirogen could see 1,000 jobs go begging as a result of this CPRS. And the list of jobs lost or forgone could go on and on and on. Hundreds of thousands of jobs could disappear under this scheme that, just as a reminder, will not make a jot of difference to the climate. In regional Australia, research commissioned by the New South Wales Government found that regional centres across Australia would shrink by 20% under the government scheme. And in some one-factory towns, the loss of industry would effectively shut the community down. This scheme is just another stake through the heart of regional Australia. And as I mentioned earlier, the government will be offering financial support for low and middle income families to help cope with the increased cost of this scheme. So why then is the government burdening all Australians with higher costs when the CPRS will make no meaningful difference to the world's climate? Put simply, the price of emission-intensive goods will increase. Electricity will increase by up to 50%. Gas and other household fuels will increase for every household. Food prices will increase. So I ask once again, why is Labor trying to place this burden on Australian families? Why is Labor threatening their jobs, their prosperity and their lifestyle when the action that Labor is proposing will have no impact on global climate change? It can only be, the only reason can be that Labor has turned their back on Australia's interests in an ill-fated attempt to ingratiate themselves amongst the leaders on the world stage. But frankly, the national price alone is too high for me to support this bill. And whilst, by virtue of our position in the National Parliament, we must consider our country's interest, I am a senator for South Australia, and I will and must consider the interests of my state. You see, when talking about job losses and increased costs, it's easy to think it won't happen in an area near you. And this scheme will affect everyone, but some, of course, will be much worse off than others. South Australia, for example, relies on agriculture, relies on manufacturing, mining and other energy-intensive industries that will all be disadvantaged by the introduction of Labor's CPRS. It is estimated that the South Australian Government will experience a net additional cost of $99 million. This will place a significant burden on other areas of state government expenditure, such as healthcare, just to cover the costs of this scheme. The town of Whyalla, where I was last week, currently facing such a promising future, would once again be plunged into uncertainty as a result of this scheme. Nearstar, a metals processing and recycling company operating in Port Pirie, estimate that a CPRS could make their smelter unviable. This would cost up to 1,700 jobs, around 30% of Port Pirie's working population. Imagine that, 1/3 of a large town's population out of work as a result of a scheme that will not and cannot achieve its stated aim. It fills me with dread, and it should fill every South Australian senator with dread too. But of course, South Australia's future is reliant on the very industries that the rabid greenies consider unfriendly to the environment. We have to accept, though, that industry is needed to continue the growth of our state. We need to see the development of our mining industry. We need to see the development of new power stations, including the proposed $350 million 450 megawatt gas-fired power station planned near Malala, a project whose viability is threatened by Labor's irrational CPRS. In the southeast of my state, the Kimberley-Clark pulp and paper mill at Millicent will suffer under the CPRS, threatening the future of their 630 employees. Every single job lost will have a flow-on impact, not only for Millicent, but for the neighbouring townships in the southeast region of my wonderful state. Of course, South Australia is reliant on more than mining and industry for its prosperity. We also have a big agricultural presence that contributes a large amount to our state economy. The proposed CPRS could take up to 22% of a farmer's income to, once again I remind the Senate, achieve no meaningful benefit for the environment. Beef eaters will pay more, beef producers will make less under this scheme. In fact, input costs will rise and profits will fall for all farmers. The inevitable result will be more farmers leaving the land, placing further pressure on regional communities. Mr Deputy President, I do not have time to further extrapolate on the danger that this bill represents to the national interest and the interests of South Australia. Local industries will be forced to close only to reopen elsewhere, effectively exporting Australian jobs and profits to other countries. Every Australian family will bear the cost of this scheme in the form of higher food and energy prices, by the loss of jobs, in the decline in real wages and the closure of communities. This CPRS is like a wish list of anti-Western, ultra-green ideology. It places hypothetical environmental benefits above the interests of every Australian. The economy, employment and families are ignored in favour of Al Gore's alarmist and discredited apocalyptic future of the world. And for what? It will have no meaningful effect on reducing global greenhouse gas levels. No matter how extreme our own approach to reducing carbon emissions, Australia can achieve nothing alone. In the absence of a global agreement, including India and China, Australia will simply be a loser by being an observant climate change disciple. We cannot and should not pursue causes, no matter how well-meaning they might be, if they will have no positive impact on the global environment and yet threaten the very future prosperity of our country. Accordingly, I will be acting in the national interest and the interests of South Australia by voting against this bill and by flagging my objection to any future incarnation that does not serve the interests of my state and my country. I ask that every South Australian senator, and in fact every senator in this place, make that same commitment. To do anything less is abrogating their responsibility under our Constitution.
Thank you, Senator Bernardi.